In 2012, Dwyane Wade did something that made no sense to anyone watching. He was one of the faces of Jordan Brand, flagship sneakers, a legacy line, the kind of deal most players spend a whole career chasing. And he walked away from it. Not for another shoe check, for a Chinese company almost nobody in America had heard of. At the time, it looked like career suicide. 14 years later, it looks like the smartest move in sneaker history. Because that one decision set off a chain reaction that's still playing out today. One that's pulled MVPs, champions, and rising stars away from Nike, Adidas, and Jordan Brand, and handed the keys to companies like Li-Ning, Anta, and 361. This is the story of how it happened. Before any of this, Wade's shoe story actually started with Converse. He signed with them as a rookie, back when the brand was fighting just to stay relevant in basketball. His early shoes worked. Sleek, shark-inspired designs, sharp Miami colorways. Converse handed him model after model, hoping he'd carry them back to relevance. It didn't last. By the time the fourth signature shoe dropped, the design had missed and Wade wasn't happy wearing it. He left in 2009 and signed with Jordan Brand, which felt like the finish line. A spot alongside the most prestigious name in the sport. But 3 years later, he left that too. This time, the destination was Li-Ning, and the deal came with something Jordan Brand never gave him: his own identity. The line was called Way of Wade. He shaped the designs himself. He started recruiting other players to follow him over. This wasn't an athlete cashing a check. It was an athlete building a company inside a company. By 2018, Wade made it permanent, signing a lifetime deal with Li-Ning. And with that, the perception shifted. Li-Ning stopped being a fallback option for players who couldn't get a Nike deal. It became a real destination, one a top-tier star had chosen on purpose. Wade's move didn't cause an instant stampede. What it did was open a door that other players started walking through, one at a time, while the American brands weren't paying close attention. In 2014, Klay Thompson signed with Anta. Years before most stars would even consider it. That relationship grew into one of the richest sneaker contracts in the league, a 10-year extension worth up to $80 million, running through 2026, and a signature KT line that took off in China before slowly gaining traction back home in the States. Jimmy Butler left Jordan Brand for Li-Ning and got a signature shoe, the JB1, almost immediately, something he'd never been given during his time with Jordan. Andrew Wiggins and Lou Williams signed with Peak. Rajon Rondo laced up in Anta for years. None of these were background deals either. Players were getting real say in how their shoes were designed. And behind the scenes, the brands themselves were transforming. Li-Ning and Anta weren't just writing checks. They were investing in design teams, opening flagship stores, hiring U.S. representatives, building the infrastructure to actually compete on a global level. It was slow, it was quiet, and it was working. Then came the moment that should have been the biggest story in sneakers, and somehow wasn't. Nikola Jokić, fresh off an MVP season and an NBA championship, signed with 361, a Chinese brand with almost no name recognition outside of China. This wasn't a struggling player looking for a lifeline. This was arguably the best basketball player alive, and Nike had never given him a signature shoe. Not after the MVPs, not after the title. So he left. Not for independence, for a company most American fans had never worn. The news barely made a ripple when it broke. It leaked out quietly, the same way most things, including Jokic, tend to happen. But the significance was massive. When a reigning champion turns his back on Nike for a brand that size, it doesn't just change how fans see that company. It changes how every other player in the league sees it too. Wade had cracked the door open in 2012. 11 years later, Jokic kicked it in the rest of the way. For a long time, Chinese sneakers carried a stigma in the US, seen as knockoffs, budget options, something you wore only if the real thing was out of reach. That stigma is gone now, and the shift shows up everywhere. Search TikTok or YouTube and you'll find the same comment over and over. Someone tried a pair of Antas almost by accident, and now it's their go-to shoe. The numbers back it up too. Anta's revenue has nearly doubled over the past 5 years. Li-Ning posted 30% year-over-year growth in its basketball category alone. And that growth is coming from real demand, not overseas hype. Even NBA veterans have said it out loud. Lou Williams and Evan Turner, players who've worn nearly every brand in existence, have publicly said their Chinese sneakers outperformed their American pairs. That's not marketing. That's guys with nothing to gain, telling the truth. By 2022, Anta had passed Nike in China entirely, becoming the country's second biggest sportswear company behind only Li-Ning. Globally, Anta is now one of the 4 largest athletic brands in the world by market cap, sitting just behind Nike, Adidas, and Puma. And then Kyrie Irving made the boldest move of them all. When Kyrie left Nike, the expectation was that he'd sign with another American brand, or maybe strike out on his own. Instead, he signed with Anta, not just as an athlete, but as the company's chief creative officer. That title came with real authority over design, branding, and production direction, not just for his own shoe, but for Anta's entire basketball line. His first signature model under Anta hit shelves within months. Fast turnaround, a full creative control, a team that actually listened. After years of public friction with Nike, Kyrie criticizing his own shoes, feeling boxed out of the process, he'd finally gotten the one thing that eluded him for a decade: freedom. A move like that would have been unthinkable 10 years earlier, back when Chinese sneaker deals were where careers went to wind down. Now it's where stars go to build something that's actually theirs. The pipeline hasn't stopped with the veterans either. Li-Ning signed R.J. Hampton before he was even drafted. Anta brought in players like Alex Caruso and Kevin Looney. High school prospects and international players are locking in deals before their names ever show up on an NBA broadcast. Because for these brands, the goal isn't just selling a shoe. It's growing with a player from the very beginning. For athletes outside that elite Nike tier, this isn't the fallback anymore. It's the better offer. A real signature line, real creative input, and marketing built around them specifically at a time when American brands are raising prices and handing out fewer signature deals than ever. And then, just when it seemed like the story couldn't top itself, Steph Curry did something nobody saw coming. After more than a decade as the face of Under Armour, Curry ended that partnership and let his sneaker-free agency play out in public. Brands lined up. Some of them offered more money than Li-Ning did. He picked Li-Ning anyway. A 10-year deal worth more than $400 million, the richest contract in sneaker history for a player his age. Curry is 38. Most athletes are winding down at that point, not signing decade-long global partnerships. This one runs well past his playing career. The terms weren't just about the check either. Curry keeps full ownership of Curry brand. He gets to expand it beyond basketball into athleisure and golf. He can sign his own athletes, male or female, under the label. And Li-Ning is building him standalone retail stores in both the US and China. This is Wade's way of Wade Blueprint, except at a scale nobody had tried before. One of the greatest shooters ever, arguably a top 10 player in NBA history, walked past Nike, past every American brand, and chose a Chinese company to build the next chapter of his empire. Wade opened the door in 2012. Jokic kicked it open in 2023. Curry just walked through it holding the biggest deal any of them have ever signed. Somewhere down the line, one of these brands is going to land a true generational prospect straight out of high school. A player who chooses Anta or Li-Ning before Nike even gets a meeting. When that happens, the entire landscape shifts again. Because this was never really about the shoes. It was about ownership. Wade proved a star could leave and build something of his own. Jokic proved even the best player alive would walk away from Nike. And Kyrie proved you could turn that walk into real creative power. What started as one risky decision in 2012 is now the blueprint every rising player is watching. This isn't a passing trend. It's already the new normal. and it's still just getting started. If you're into stories like this, where sports collide with business and money, hit subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of stuff we break down. And drop a like if you had no idea Jokic walked away from Nike for 361.